Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spanning the Need. I am your host, Anthony Spano. Tonight, we're going to talk about nonprofits and what's really going on in the industry right now. And here to do that, from Farmers Trust Company, part of Farmers National Bank, is Debbi Grinstein. Debbi, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here.
Not a problem. So before we'll be talking a lot about the nonprofits, what's really going on, what during the pandemic, and maybe what some nonprofits maybe need to know and what we can do but let's talk about you for a minute. What talk about your career and how you got to where you are now?
Well, I'm originally from New York, although I've lived here for most of my life. I moved here when I got married to a third generation Youngstowner. And I love the community. And that has a lot to do with how I feel about what I do, because you can't, you have to have that passion to be able to support the nonprofits and to understand why they're so important to our community. So I started out at Dollar Savings and Trust Company as a trust officer after my husband and I went to law school. And came back, and as we all do, we have our families, and it was time to, think about maybe spending some more time with the kids as they grew up. And so the Youngstown Area Jewish Federation, Sam Cooperman offered me a job part-time as the endowment director for the organization. And so I went from a full-time job at the trust company to 12 hours and did get to spend time with my kids. And I was there for 26 years. Not only did I Sam and I helped to grow that endowment to a very nice number, but had a lot of fun doing that. We went from fundraising to becoming a funder, to going out into the community to see what was needed and how we could do good beyond our walls on Gypsy Lane. So I left there, and I wasn't ready to end my career. I knew that I had done good and well for the Jewish community, and I went back to my roots as a trust officer. And Dollar Bank's not around anymore, but Farmers Trust is very progressive. They understand that, we need to continue to move forward in this community. And we're always looking for ways to help the community, whether it's a Community Reinvestment Act or just philanthropy. And I was brought in to help nonprofits establish and grow their endowments for future financial sustainability. Because if there's nothing we haven't realized in the past year in 2020 is that there are times that we're a feast and times of famine. And we really had a pretty big scare this past year. So the idea to have reserves and endowments available to get through those hard times is so important.
And we'll talk a little bit about that and everything like that. And let's talk about kind of where nonprofits are kind of generalized before pandemic. What did it look like in the community? Was it very strong? Was it how are nonprofits doing before pandemic?
So I sort of classify our nonprofits in three categories: grassroots, and those that have development directors and are very healthy, and then there's the middle range of nonprofits. They're healthy, but they haven't gotten to the point where they are sustainable. So sorry about that.
No, it happens all the time.
Okay, so those are the really important organizations that do excellent work in our community. But overall, we've got a great nonprofit business community. And I think of you say nonprofit, but they are businesses. They have financials. They file 990s. They have responsibility to their board and to the community. And you want to see them benefit and succeed. every year. And unfortunately, their success is helping others who are not as successful, is not as lucky, and have need. So we
And so and we wonder, we talk about that there are, I think in the area, there's probably a good hundreds of nonprofits
absolutely.
that people don't really realize. That you'll see the bigger ones, the United Way, the Community Foundation, the ones that real the Ween and the Youngstown, which just got a new president. And we talk about nonprofits in general, which some are service oriented, some are, like you said, grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
What kind what kind of impact do nonprofits make in the community as a whole?
Well, you have people who, again, who don't have. You've seen the hunger in the community. If we take hunger, we can take hunger shelter, all the subsistent things that many of us, we don't take it for granted, but we have it. We don't have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about it. But there are people in our community that worry about electricity and water every single day that their kids will eat, even though they have their cards and get food. There's just not enough, and it's not the right kind of food. And how they get that food, because parts of Youngstown are food deserts. And do they have the right coat for winter? Children grow, and you can, yeah, you have hand-me-downs, but children grow and they're active, and those coats, they're not made so well and they fall apart, and you still need a coat every year. So we have wonderful people in our community who, from those grassroots people, from families who create some kind of organization just for coats, just for diapers for children. I mean, and then we have the larger ones like Second Harvest Food Bank, that is well known to everybody. And because they're so large, they feed the community. They feed the entire community, or help to feed the community through their pantries.
And talking with their executive director just right after the holidays, because right now we're almost at the end of January, and we'll be looking at different stuff with people with the vaccine and everything. We know that the executive director at Second Harvest Food Bank, they're basically busting at the seams because there's so much need right now that they just can't get enough food to get out quick enough.
Yes, yes. So, and in terms of donor development, though, they've done a great job. So again, programmatically, they're busting at the seams, but thankfully, again, 2020 was that strange year, but people have been so generous, and they know that that this organization can and does succeed to fulfill their mission of feeding people.
And let's talk about the pandemic. 2020 was probably a year that people will remember for a long time. There was a news story or article that there's an individual. She was, I don't know, 100 and some years old, or that lived through both
Yeah.
the Spanish flu and COVID.
Yeah.
So back then there wasn't probably the nonprofits that we have now. And so how does the pandemic really affected nonprofits?
Well, thankfully, the pandemic would have affected them worse had it not been for the CARES Act and the Payroll Protection Plan, because nonprofits, if they were eligible, were able to participate in that as well. So if they could, they kept on their staff and continued their job. Some people were furloughed for a while, depending on the need and what their mission is. Unfortunately, some nonprofit missions weren't as essential, or again, that subsistence need wasn't there. So there were different layers, but I think in our community, I don't know many. There might be a few, but not many who didn't make it through the year, as far as I
It,
know. That
what advice would you give nonprofits? You kind of go through this with the PPP and everything like that. What kind of advice would you give them for planning now, kind of moving forward, where we're still kind of in the middle of a pandemic, but there may be a light at the end of the tunnel?
there is. I believe that everybody has to get their boards together, look at their strategic plan, look at their financials, see what they have in the bank. Um, be more communicative with the community. Get out there on Facebook and LinkedIn and whatever social media or press release that they can get to explain their need. And people read everything. So you just have to be have a broad spectrum of media, but you also have to explain who you are, why you're doing this, and how you can give. And it has to be easy. There are some sites, that are real easy. You click and you put in your credit card. Others aren't as easy. Some ask to, if you want to talk to somebody, you have to make sure that whatever that phone number is on your website, that somebody's answering the calls or the emails. And you have to be responsive to that as well. And you have to listen.
And I think that's some good advice, because we don't know how without more help, without, I know they just refilled or at least gave some money to the PPP here just about a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
But there may not be enough for nonprofits because businesses are really hurting. Or do you know more the advice that you can give people with the new PP information?
I can tell you that the new law that came out, there is still PPP money in the first round that you can apply for. And I think the banks now have the time to talk to you. So go out there and call your banker. Find somebody, if it's not your bank, because they don't want to talk to you because you're not the right size or not the right person, go to another bank. They'll be more than happy to help you. Go to Farmers. Not making, we're a community bank and we'll help you. But there is PPP 1 out there, and there is a second round that if you qualify for it, you can get it again. I believe one of the thresholds for the second round of PPP 2 is that you had to have a 25% drop in your revenue in one quarter of 2020 from the same quarter in 2019. So there is more money out there. It's just that you have to show that whether you're a for-profit or for nonprofit, that you're hurting. So there are rules. I'll tell you what, every accountant in town knows. So if you use anybody, those should be very easy to tell. Call up your accountant, talk to them. I don't have that information right in front of me now, but I have that as well. So but I'm not an accountant. So there are other people out there that can help you better than me, but the accountants should be able to help, and the bankers.
Well, and that's some good information, because people, sometimes it's hard to understand some of the rules and regulations that the government puts out, the CARES Act, the Small Business Administration, who helped provide a lot of that information and making up the rules and guidance on that.
So, right. And you have to use it a certain way, to pay for 60% for payroll, 40% for other COVID-related things that you did to provide for the business over that time. But on the revenue side of things, the CARES Act also provided in 2020 for $300 contribution to be deductible on your tax return. And in 2021, they finally explained it a little better. Now it's $100 per person charitable deduction to be taken off of your tax return. So if you're married filing jointly, you can take a $600 deduction. And you say, well, that's all well and good, but there are a lot of people in our community who 300, 200, $600 is a lot of money, but they want to do something good for the community. And they're not going to be able, under the Secure Act, which was from 2018, we had the standard deduction. You don't have to give a charitable contribution because you weren't going to be able to deduct it. Now they gave you the incentive to deduct at least $300 or $600 and that will help with your taxes.
I think that's people may not, like you said, $300 may not be a lot, but I think the need is huge for nonprofits, Second Harvest Food Bank, United Way, people doing education, poverty. I mean, you name it, it's bad right now.
Nobody knows what you do. Nobody's going to judge you for how much you give. It's about you feeling good about what you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that brings up a good point is now kind of moving forward, we talked about what you should be kind of planning right now, what nonprofits should be looking at least the next, you hope 3 to 5 months, depending on how long we go with the pandemic. I know Spanish flu lasted about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. So we hope this one doesn't last any much longer than that.
Well, it's amazing that these vaccines are coming out so quickly. We just need that pipeline of vaccine to get to us. And hopefully in the next couple of months, this will be over. The president-elect wants us to wear masks for 100 days altogether, which is about the time that all of us can be inoculated if they get the vaccine out.
Let's talk about kind of the next step for nonprofits. Kind of let's just say let's look. We've talked kind of about pandemic and what some of the options and some of the things moving forward. Kind of beyond the pandemic. What should nonprofits be looking at long term, longer than kind of, I hate to say every 6 months because that's pretty much what I know at least our foundation's been looking at every kind of 3 to 5 months because we don't know when we're going to get out of this pandemic. So we're kind of just taking it every couple months.
So let's get back to normal times. And in normal times, there are a couple of different avenues of income. You can get grants, of course. You can get government assistance, and you can get annual gifts from your donors or from fundraisers and things like that. So you have a pretty good list of who your funders are and who your friends are. And I call them friends because every year they're going to, in normal times and in bad times too, make a contribution to you annually. Well, this is where the donor development comes in because there's another circle there, and that's called endowments. And there are ways for people to make larger gifts that can help them during their lifetime or make them feel good upon death about giving those gifts. So the easiest gift, of course, is to write a check, a large check, and want that to, you're not going to use that. The organization's not going to use that check in 1 year. It's meant to create a reserve or an endowment where the income is used over many years. And maybe you take out a little principal here and there, but at the end of the day, that donor is funding a program or a project over a long term. So there's some safety net there for that program or project and the mission of the organization. Well, check's very easy. Another way, one and done, is obviously you have to wait until you pass away, but making a bequest in your will or a distribution in your trust. And again, that you can hold that, the organization can hold that money for a long term. It can be named after you, so you're memorialized as well. And there's something nice about that for your family. And it's also a great way to make an example to the community. Take Dee Davis, for instance, and Mill Creek, or any of the Davis contributions, because we know that, they wanted to be remembered, but they also want to create that example for the community. And then, without getting into too much detail, because there are legal aspects of this, there's something called a split gift, where a donor can receive income for his or her lifetime or a spouse's lifetimes, and upon their passing, the organization then gets the gift. So it's a great thing to do these days for something called a charitable gift annuity. I won't get into it too much, but the amount of income that you get in return for your gift that you make now is based on your age. So the older you are, the higher the income. I believe at this time, with these low interest rates, an 80-year-old could probably get between 5 and 6% return on a gift to a charitable organization for the rest of their lives. If you're 90, probably between 6 and 7%. And then the organization, gives you that annuity. It's called an annuity. It's not insurance, but it's you get
Right.
a check every year. And when you pass away, then whatever's left in that fund becomes an endowment for the organization. And these organizations realize that they may have to wait for a gift, but at the end of the day, the donor who gave you $100 every year for the past 10, 20 years may be the right person to have a conversation with to create some kind of endowment gift. If you don't ask, you will never know. And that's what's so important for the executive directors, and board members, development directors, to take that person out to lunch, or better yet, bring that person into your organization. Let them see how it works. Bring lunch in. After the tour, sit down and have a conversation. Now, the first conversation might not, maybe you don't ask, but you develop a rapport. And through education and cultivation, there could be a gift at the other end of that.
And those are great suggestions on kind of how to grow your nonprofit for long term. You may just have to lay the groundwork. In nonprofit, it's like, what's the worst they're going to say? No.
The worst they can say is no, and it could take a long time. People don't see their lawyers to have their wills redone every year, but they can. Or they can talk to them and have an amendment made, but it's at the right time. When that you have to, it's a sensitivity thing. You really have to know when it's the right time to ask, and don't wait too long.
And I think that's great. Let me ask you this: if you don't, and this is just kind of a side question. Well, we know that there are a lot of nonprofits that really don't have staff. They're either fundraising for a scholarship of their friend or that passed away, or something happened to someone. What advice would you give those nonprofits that have no staff, it's all volunteer, but they want to try to do good in the community? What advice kind of would you give them with your years of experience?
Well, so there are quite a number of those, and those are the grassroots. And Tony, you've done a great thing starting your organization, the Anthony V. Spano Foundation, and you have the ability, those groups, giving circles, may want to consider becoming a fund, whether it's your fund, whether it's a fund of the Farmers Charitable Foundation, whether it's a fund of the community foundations, depending on, it really depends on what kind of fund it is. But and you have to collaborate. I think there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of good things. And if they looked at what they were doing, they'd see that there's a lot of similarity. And if, egos and personalities, if you could create You know,
If you've been in the business a long time, you understand that comment greatly.
yeah. If you could just see that collaborating and merging a number of like-minded things, codes for kids, whatever it might be, children-related organizations. Do you each need your own, or can you have one which has different funds and still has a mission of all together? So, and you don't need professional development people. You just have to learn how to do it yourself. As whoever the executive director is, whoever the board members are, they're there for a purpose. Board development, board succession, understanding fiduciary responsibility of a board, and knowing that you might be needed to open that door, to identify that donor and open that door so that the director, whoever he or she is, whether it's a singular director of a small organization or a big one, has the opportunity to start a conversation with a potential donor.
And I think that's some great, and we know, and I think from just at least the Mahoning Valley, we know there are a lot of great organizations. We know there are some that do some duplicate service, but they do it in their kind of own little kind of geographic or local type area. What can really help kind of move a foundation along its growing? What, like, if someone wanted to start a foundation or just they wanted to do something good? We talk about funds and stuff like that, but they may not know what that is. So what would be, if someone wanted to do good in the community, they wanted to raise money for, what advice would you give them?
Well, they can get on to Charity Navigator or GuideStar, or they can look through, or go to the library. The foundation directory is there, and they have a lot of good information about those things. You can go to, I know you're looking at little, smaller things, or the Community Foundation, Youngstown Foundation. They know a lot about the large and maybe the grassroots, maybe not so much of the grassroots, but they have resources as well. And you can look at that. You can, again, a donor advised fund at any public foundation will allow you to make those distributions. The part I play at Farmers is that I know many of these, both grassroots and larger organizations, and I can take that donor, take them by the hand, and
sometimes you have to, and get them through.
Yeah, and make the phone call and introduce them to the directors, and again, take them there, because that's the only way they're going to know what they're doing, what they want to do, whether it's animal charities of any sort, again, or hunger, or health. We've got a lot of great nonprofit hospitals in this community who do wonderful things, and certainly need funding.
Well,
so much.
Let me ask you, explain what to people that may not understand what a donor advised fund is. Just give a quick, simple explanation of what a donor advised fund is, because people only know of nonprofits, but they don't get down to kind of in the weeds of donor advised or special types of funds.
Well, I'm gonna use my favorite phrase. It's a charitable checkbook. You never heard that one before, right?
No, I have not. That's a new one.
It's a gateway giving and charitable checkbook. So you, because this secures, donor advised funds have been around for 50 or 60 years, if not longer. But what it is creating a fund, making an irrevocable charitable contribution to a 501c3 organization, which will then take the funds that you donated and put them into an account with your name on it. You receive a a tax deduction for that amount. And then because it's not your money anymore, but you can recommend charitable contributions to nonprofits. The best way to explain it in the era of the Secures Act is that you can bunch your charitable contribution into one big account and get a tax deduction, and then sprinkle any amount of funds, typically $100 or more, into any organization you want over any number of years. And if there's a year you don't want to make a distribution out of your named fund, you don't have to, because you've already gotten your tax deduction, but the money is there for you to use for your charitable intent. And I call it a charitable checkbook is what it is.
Go ahead.
It can go, it's great. It can go on for generations. You can replenish it. It might go down to a zero balance for a year or two. You can keep it open and replenish it at any time. You can sit down with your grandchildren at Christmas time and talk to them about how you think, tell them what you do with your philanthropy and ask them what they'd like to do with $100 or $200. You can teach them philanthropy. You can leave a legacy to your family and to the community.
I think that's some great advice for people to kind of understand. So you kind of pass it down from generation to generation with maybe the same account. You can still, and what people understand is, okay, I may open the donor advised fund with my wife and another person, but then as I get older, I can then give it to my son, daughter, and they can now manage where that money goes. And you can keep doing that, because if I pass away, and it's just kind of a rotating thing.
Yeah. And not unlike any other nonprofit, you can make a bequest or a distribution out of your trust to fund it at death.
Mm-hmm.
You can,
because it's a 501c3.
It's a 501c3. So there's so many ways to fund all of these things. It's a whole other conversation. But
well, let me ask. This is just a personal question to me. What do you think is better? Me just donating money directly to the, like, say I directly want to donate it to XYZ fund, or I'm sorry, XYZ Foundation, or do you think it should be versus donor fund?
So that again, you can either way. And for any number, again, it has to do with the Secures Act, your taxes. There are a lot of different moving parts. But if you're giving away $4,000 to $5,000 a year, and I'm talking about a married couple filing jointly, and you can't get to that threshold of $24,800, I believe that's
20. Yeah, it's 22, 24. That's 20, whatever the new tax.
Whatever the number is, right? And
right.
You're giving away. You're making wonderful charitable gifts. Again, there's no judgment here, and your tax return doesn't reflect your charitable contributions. Then that's a time when you should really think about a donor advised fund. And if you're able to put in 3, 4, 5 years worth of charitable contributions and get that tax deduction in year one, then you never have to take another dime out of your pocket for years 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. So that has a lot to do with it. So there's a financial motivation for a donor advised fund.
Mm-hmm.
As well as other personal motivations.
That's great. That's good information, because I think people think of a nonprofit as, oh, I know what you do, so I'm going to donate $100. But when you really get behind the scenes, there's more moving parts than you may realize.
So the other side of that is,
hey, if I were here,
yeah, we have some time. You can make a multi-year gift to an organization. It used to be that you used to make a pledge of a 5-year gift to be paid over a number of
Right.
years. Now it's backwards. Now you want to give them 3 years, let's say 3 years worth of contributions to get to that threshold to make it, to itemize. But then again, you have to worry that that organization, one, is going to use the money as you wish it to.
Hmm.
And that means they might not want to do that because maybe they can't do the accounting for it. And they say, oh, look at this. We've got $10,000 when they gave us $3,500 a year. Now they're giving us $10,000 this year. And you tell them this is for 3 years. And they're going to come back in year 2 and say, can you give us 10,000? I said, no, we told you that's for 3 years. So all of a sudden that's not a good thing. That's a contention because they're not listening to you and they've abused your trust. So the donor advised fund might be the better way to go because then you can control how you wish to give that over the years.
And I think that also is on the donor development officer to say, hey, okay, I have the paperwork. It's a 3-year sponsorship of something, and I'm paying it all up front.
Yeah.
It's almost similar to that.
Yeah. So and every donor is unique. Every situation is unique. We can't really bunch people up together. We have to, it's important, again, no judgment, but it's really nice, and people should be treated well for doing good.
Exactly. Treat someone as you would like to be treated is the term I like to say. Yes. Well, Debbi, I appreciate you taking time. Let me ask you this, just to kind of wrap things up. Is there anything else that nonprofits should be doing that we haven't talked about, or that's you think that may be coming down the pipeline?
There's a lot coming down the pipeline, but I don't like talking about it because you never know what Congress is going to do.
Well, and that's a respectful answer.
I do think, though, that boards should look at board development, education. It's really important. We should look at succession planning. We're as a community, we're an aging community, so we want to keep our organizations going. We have to make sure that there are people to take those professional positions. So That's something to look at because, we're not going to be here forever as much as we want to be. I'm
going to live till I'm like 300 now.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you this. What is there anywhere that if someone wanted to, I know if they want to look you up, you're more than what you're on LinkedIn, you're on online. You can also look her up on Farmers Trust Company's website. Is there any websites and or specific maybe links that people can go to for general information that would be a good resource?
That's a good question. Sure. You can just put in a Google search for donor advised funds. Now, the first thing that will come up is probably Vanguard and Fidelity, and all the brokerage houses have donor advised funds. They don't talk about it.
But they're paying for advertising.
They're paying for that, but it's a good place to learn about it. What I can tell you is that the reason we started Farmers Charitable Foundation is because we don't want those charitable dollars leaving this community. We want them to stay here. People can do, the mission is a general mission so that they can do whatever they want. They can send their funds to whatever nonprofit anywhere in the country or the world they want to, but the philanthropy should emanate from home.
I agree with that.
Anthony V. Spano Foundation.
Exactly.
So while Fidelity and Vanguard have great sites to explain this to you, make sure you come to us.
Keep it local, because they can still, even if you're from the Youngstown area and you want to do something good, bring it home. You can live in Texas and still have a fund here and still donate your money to maybe a Texas nonprofit as well, and donate it home as well. So there are no really restrictions except maybe the United States, depending on what your description of your fund is or what you want to do.
Correct. We use American Friends for some foreign organizations because they are allowed to do that. And we find that the churches, if there's a mission or something overseas, that the churches can forward those funds overseas for us.
Yeah, because depending on the subsidy and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, this was very enlightening, a lot of great information, and I hope people watching can kind of understand nonprofit side of it. People understand the front end of it, of donating, and then what the services are, but now we kind of get deeper into that and what options are for nonprofits. And I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know there's a lot going on right now, and I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So at the end of every show, I like to ask 5 questions. So these are 5 questions I ask everyone, so they're not particular just to you, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
So we look at, so the answer can be personal or professional, either one. Okay. So the first question I have would be, what is your best accomplishment in life?
I'd say my children.
Nothing wrong with that.
I have 3 wonderful children who have all left the house, have all gone to school, are independent. I have 4 grandchildren.
I bet you that's a treat and busy.
Yeah, it keeps me busy, and that's wonderful too, but that's not my accomplishment. That's theirs. But I sleep well at night. My husband and I sleep well at night. So we're very happy that they're doing well and that we've accomplished that.
Okay, nothing wrong with that. What's your best memory?
Let me see. I have I love to travel. So I think I always look forward to that. I don't know if there's every time I travel, I just have such a good time. And I don't know if there's any one over another, but we had the opportunity to go to Asia a number of years ago. And we went to the northern part of Thailand and spent a day on an elephant preserve.
Interesting.
I had my own elephant. His name was Pooh. And we fed him, we bathed him. I climbed up and rode him bareback. It was truly, it's a memorable experience.
I hope the name didn't indicate what else he did.
Pooh, P-U. No. They do that too, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, we're not getting into that.
No, different webcast.
Where else? Just on a side note, where else did you go in Asia?
My son was in Singapore, so we said if he got the job in Singapore, we'd visit him. So we went to Singapore. We went to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which was.
You really went to those countries. That's interesting. I hear there's some nice areas.
It was beautiful. I don't call it third world. I call it emerging, because everybody was industrious and. There weren't beggars on the street. Everybody was doing something, and it was just fascinating. And they all spoke English. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and you kind of say, okay, where's that language? And then all of a sudden they're like, you're like, do you speak English? And then they pretty much will say yes, and they're like, oh, okay. I did that, me and my wife went to Italy for our honeymoon, and It was hard because do you speak English? And most of the people spoke English. In Italy, so that was good. Oh, hey, nothing wrong with that. What's your best experience? These questions are tougher than the ones I probably asked you during the podcast.
Well, that elephant really was something. I'd almost say that whether that's a memory or an experience, getting up on the elephant. I have a video of it actually. So.
Coming to you live on the
But I'll show it to you one day.
Okay. Who would be your role model?
Role model. So, it's interesting. When I did move here, both my husband and my father-in-law are attorneys as well as I am. And so the one reason I went to the trust company was because, it's still a large community, but a small community. So we weren't all going to practice law. And I'm really happy I went there. I really am. But when I got into philanthropy, the women in this community are really dynamic. They're they take on challenges and they work hard. When I told you that, and when you said the same thing I did, the worst thing that they could say is no, but if you don't ask, you'll never know. And so those mentors were other board members who went before me and who showed me the way.
Okay. Now, this is the one question that I like to ask, and I change it up every once in a while. If there was one person you'd want to meet, past or present, who would it be and why?
Well, have to think about that for a while, but sort of cheated on you. Sorry, Tony. I did.
Aw, you watched other podcasts.
um, I decided that the one person I wanted to meet and where to meet that person was Neil Armstrong on the moon. I've always been fascinated by space travel. Once again, just traveling, just this roamer. This pandemic's been really hard on me, not being able to.
It's been hard on a lot of people.
Yeah. But yeah, Neil Armstrong on the moon, to hear his experience firsthand would be really something interesting, and to experience it myself.
Okay. And actually, Neil Armstrong's from Ohio,
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So, but that's good. That's good. Well,
Yeah.
Debbie, I appreciate your time and taking out of a busy schedule. I know with everything going on, like I said earlier. So I thank you for enjoying and watching another podcast of Spaying the Need. For more interviews, podcasts, and announcements, please go to anthonyvspano.com. Everyone have a very blessed night. Stay safe and God bless. Good night, everyone.